I'd like to welcome everyone to Knowing Your Online Science Lab Options. The first time we're offering this session. And my name is Dan Cabrera. I'm the Multimedia Coordinator, and I'm doing part-time online teaching coordinator, sharing that responsibility with my colleague, Amanda.
And I'm Amanda Smothers. I'm the Teaching and Learning Coordinator, and as Dan mentioned, also sharing those duties of the Online Teaching Coordinator.
All right, so we've introduced ourselves, but I'd like you guys to take a minute to introduce yourself in the chat box. Okay, so in the lower right-hand corner, there's a purple tab. If you click on that, there's a sidebar menu that opens up, and on the bottom of that, there's a series of icons. The very first icon looks like a bubble. If you cursor over it, it'll say chat, and just provide your name and your department or your division. Whether you're a professor, a faculty member, instructor, a TA, and what you hope to get out of this workshop. And then you would just hit enter after typing something in. So I guess I'd give a little bit more information about myself. I am Dan Cabrera. I've been working at the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning since about 2002. But my background is in public health. I got a doctorate in public health at UCLA School of Public Health in 1995, I think. So I've been here for a while. I teach for the College of Health and Human Sciences courses in public health and also in ethics. Amanda?
I have been with NIU, with the Center for Innovative Teaching and Learning, formerly for Faculty Development, for about a year and a half. And I've been teaching college English for over 12 years. I earned my PhD in English from NIU in 2016. And I'm actually still teaching online part-time at area colleges like Elgin Community College and Harper College, College DuPage, Columbia College, Chicago. So lots of lots of jobs outside of my full-time job here at NIU.
Thank you, Amanda. We see that Tyler, he is in kinesiology, physical education as an assistant professor. Yes, we hope to address that issue of understanding better the potential of virtual labs. I'm not sure if I've seen one on kinesiology and physical education, but I would not be surprised if there are a number of those types of that particular topic. And Zoe is Department of Geology, Environmental and Geosciences. She's a TA. She's an instructor of record. She's not taught any labs online, which is great. Actually, when I was an undergraduate, I was in several geology labs, and I found them to be incredibly interesting. At the time, there was no idea that we'd be doing anything online. So she wants to know what the options are for geology and how to get students engaged online. Hopefully, we will be able to address all of those. What we will specifically look at in this workshop is describe the current state of online laboratory science. And it's constantly evolving. One of the challenges in looking for that is that there's a lot of material online, but a lot of it is, I should say, is somewhat dated. I was surprised to see, and I noticed that when I went to the websites, the interface, the designer seemed to be from the early 2000s. So that was a sort of a giveaway that site needed to be updated. We'll also be listing options that facilitate a continuation of face-to-face lab activities in an online environment. I was hoping to identify a sequence of steps preparing for an online lab activity, and I should say that both Amanda and I completed the Online Learning Consortium Science Mastery series on virtual labs, and unfortunately, there is a restriction on sharing a template, because it's their proprietary material, and so I don't really feel comfortable in doing that. In fact, it explicitly says unless you have permission to not use that. So I'm gonna sort of show something else that's related to it, but not directly that. Okay, and I'm gonna put that toward the end because I want to make sure we get through all of the material. And finally, benefits and challenges in working with virtual labs. Okay, at this point, I'm going to ask my colleague Amanda, to start her portion of the presentation. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to just go over the current state of online laboratory science, basically just an overview of some research and some resources that you might find helpful, and I'm going to share some links in the chat, but we'll also send these out afterwards too. So I've got 4 different university and college websites that I'm going to share. And let me just get the first one into the chat for you so that you can kind of take a look at that. So Dartmouth had a great quote on their website, and they said that labs are often either integrated as components of larger lecture courses, lab sections, or comprise the entirety of smaller lab courses. In both scenarios, it's worth defining what the labs are meant to achieve before selecting a remote teaching alternative. So I thought that was really a great quote to highlight the fact that before you do anything with an online lab or planning an online lab, you need to identify your objectives first, your goals for the lab, the goals for the course, before you select that remote teaching or that online teaching alternative. So on their website, they have some explanations of different remote lab activities and experiences, and those include interpreting experimental data, learning laboratory techniques and their application, and then some considerations for online lab activities. The next website that I'm going to highlight is the University of Central Florida, and I will share that link in the chat right now. So the thing that I really like about their website is that they have an expansive Google Sheets document at the top, and it has collaborative resources. You can open this up, you can actually add to it, but it's very expansive. There's so much there, and I couldn't even possibly give an overview of it, but they do highlight some of the resources, kind of give an overview of what resources are out that have been added to this document. And some categories of different types of resources are virtual labs and interactive activities. Labs or simulations include a cost component, so that aren't just free or open access. You would actually need to pay, or your students would pay for that. They also include video demos, which would be great for like an introductory course, lab kits and remote labs. So there are lab kits that are available online for purchase. And that aids with remote labs, so students would be able to use those lab kits at home. And then they also have additional resources on their website. So definitely check out that Google Sheets document and look at all of the different resources that faculty have shared. The next website is Washington State University's resources. So let me just add that to. All right, so on their website, they give options for virtual labs and simulations for laboratory-based classes. There's a PDF document there at the top on how to quickly and safely move a lab course online. There's also a list of online resources and platforms, some links to simulation resources. Sorry about the dog barking in the background. 3D models and nailed lab kits. All right, finally, I'll share the California Community College's website, and let me just grab that URL for you and post that to the chat. All right, so they have resources, a pretty comprehensive list of resources also on mastering techniques and concepts, so how to get students to master techniques and concepts online, and then an extension of that, how to apply the techniques and concepts. They also have a list of OERs, those open educational resources. That's educational resources that are available openly and freely online. And those OERs include lab activities, textbook resources, etc. And then there's also some lab observation links, and those are links to labs that students can observe. All right, so I did a little bit of research too on Web of Science, and there are relevant science education articles. Dan mentioned, the early 2000s. So there's I think the earliest one that's on that repository was from 2003, and that was discussing LabVIEW software, which is still available today. And then they expand all the way up to 2020, and a lot of the most recent articles are discussing moving labs online during the COVID pandemic. So a few things that these articles highlight are, discussing the differences between non-major versus major courses. Each course is going to have different goals. And then those goals are going to inform your approaches to online labs. So a non-major course or an introductory course might lend itself better to doing, something with AR or VR, or with, doing observations of labs or virtual simulations. Whereas, major courses might need more of that hands-on approach of a lab kit, or, might need some sort of face-to-face approach. So some examples of approaches in the literature, one article talked about chemistry in the kitchen, so an introductory chemistry course that used their lab component at students' homes as taking the chemistry of cooking. And then another article talked about incorporating literature into organic chemistry labs, which with the goal of encouraging development of writing and presentation skills. So that's another angle. And then another article talked about adapting an online lab module for teaching specific heat capacity of beverages to health sciences students. So taking what students might already have in their homes and turning that into a scientific experiment and scientific lab experience. Another article mentioned engaging students in remote data analysis, literature review, and science writing, and science journal clubs as some approaches. And then finally, there was another recent article that talked about process-oriented guided inquiry learning and how to do that in an online environment through several plan, do, study, act cycles. So lots of great articles out there. You might be able to find some that specifically are tailored to your discipline, but there's definitely a lot out there that you can find for ideas. And that's all I have, Dan.
Thank you, Amanda. So now let's look at options that facilitate a continuation of face-to-face lab activities. So these would include virtual labs, remote instrumentation, and lab kits, sometimes called kitchen kits. Okay, so what is a virtual lab? Well, it is interactive. It's a digital simulation of the types of activities that typically would take place in a physical laboratory setting. So with virtual labs, you can simulate things like tools and equipment, tests. You can run tests. You can have procedures that you use in a variety of fields like chemistry and biochemistry and physics and biology, and any other discipline that has a laboratory component as part of the curriculum. Now, a key characteristic of virtual labs is their interactivity. So we're not talking about video recordings that just show you how to do lab activities. If they can't be manipulated by users, that's sort of not something that we're going to be discussing today. Although I will use those, ironically, in trying to demonstrate some activities. All right. So how does it work? Virtual labs. Well, they are almost always, if not always, operated online. They can be embedded in your learning management system. So we might be able to see something in Blackboard. And as with a physical lab, faculty members determine which lab assignments are required to support their learning objectives at various points in the syllabus. And I think Amanda mentioned about the use of learning objectives. Students have access to virtual representations of the equipment and supplies that normally would find in a physical lab. In a virtual lab, for example, students might find beakers or pipettes, cylinders, other types of glassware. They might use any combination of acid and bases or other types of solutions, have Bunsen burners, using scales, and any other needed hardware. Students follow the steps of the assigned procedure and they can report all of the results just as they would in a physical classroom. By the way, I should say that a lot of material that I've gotten for this section really is from EDUCAUSE, the ELI, 7 things you should know about virtual labs. It was very, very helpful. Okay. Now, students see digital simulations or the results of their actions or their missteps if they make a mistake, which is really important. Now, most virtual labs allow users to stop, to start, if they want to replay a certain activity, which is something you may not be able to do in a physical lab. Many virtual labs integrate with the course's curriculum. It's part of an overreaching or an extensive collection of courses that are related that build on one upon the other. So the lab would be part of a lesson, which would be part of a course, which would be part of a curriculum. Also recording students' progress and assigning credit toward learning goals and grading. Virtual lab application and the content within them can be bought from vendors or developed in-house. So let's look at virtual lab options. Options that have an immersive 3D interaction that are adaptive to learning styles and have an LMS integration. So let's take a look at some examples of virtual labs. That's going to be in, I'm going to be sharing my screen. So Labster is a very popular private organization that provides virtual lab experiences for many institutions, both universities and high schools. Labster also has a pricing structure by institution type and whether it's a starter account, full course, institution-wide, or system-wide. You can observe that their simulation catalog touches on a range of disciplines. They have more than 150 simulations. So let's look at some of them. We can see acid and bases principles. Let's scroll down further, bacterial isolation, bacterial quantification by culture, cellular respiration, competition, confocal microscopy. All right, so we go down the list right here, and there are quite a number. So let's listen to what they have to say about their product.
What if you could give your students access to a fully equipped million-dollar laboratory that engages them in science through a highly immersive learning experience? With Labster, you can. Labster offers students access to a realistic lab experience that will let them perform experiments and practice their skills in a fun and risk-free learning environment. Students learn with the help of theory pages and quiz questions and experience immersive 3D simulations that visualize life science down to the molecular level. This helps them understand abstract concepts and master difficult techniques. They are challenged with true-to-life scenarios.
Okay, I think we get the idea. Very sophisticated offering for students in chemistry and biology and physics. ProxyLab is a similar business enterprise. However, they do have a free account option, and which provides 6 simulations. The paid plans include access to additional simulations. So we can see that they have virtual labs for biology, for chemistry, and for physics. And so here we have the different options. And this is a free account. I have a free account. I have DNA extraction and agarose gel. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce that. So let's look at some examples. Take a minute to initialize here. All right, I'm going to choose English. Let's see, these are some instructions for how to navigate. I'm going to click on OK. And now it says, in this experiment, we will carry out some steps to separate and identify molecules of DNA fragments by size. click to the next button, and so I'm ready to go. I click on this little interesting looking device. Step 1, we will begin by preparing the agarose gel with a weight of 2 grams of agarose powder. And this item is flashing, so I imagine they want me to click on that. I also wanted to show you that you can move around the lab. Okay, there is a chalkboard with some interesting information, and then we can pursue that. All right. Macmillan Publishers also has options for virtual labs since they have textbooks in a lot of STEM fields. So let's look at what they have to say about their offering.
The new Hayden McNeil Lab Simulation experience begins on the course homepage. Students will click the lab manual in order to access the background information. When they've finished reviewing this information, they can move on to the procedure. The procedures page is also where the icon exists to launch the lab simulation. When students enter the lab, they'll first see the personal protective equipment prompt. Students must mark each checkbox to acknowledge and confirm that they are wearing the appropriate PPE in order to begin the experiment. Once inside the lab, you'll notice the difference that the instruments, materials, and
Okay, I think we get a good feeling for what this virtual lab offers. The University of Colorado provides simulations in the disciplines of physics, chemistry, math, earth science, and biology. So it provides over 150 interactive simulations. Okay, so let's choose one. Let's click on earth science. Okay, we've already clicked on the subject. Grade level. We can choose our audience. So let's have university setting. And let's look at some of the options. Okay, we have a number. Let's see, look at fluid pressure and flow. And we can see, let's see, this is a donation-based operation as opposed to the private business organizations that we just looked at previously with Labster and Proxy Labs. Can I click on it? Okay, so we have some options here. We're looking at fluid pressure and flow. So we look at pressure. We can adjust the fluid density. We could increase it or decrease it. We could increase or decrease gravity. We can add a ruler and a grid if necessary to make it, and we can change the units of measurements, metric, atmospheres, and English. Right? Or we can reset it all. We can do the same thing for flow, water flow, and then from a water tower. Now we're visiting the ACS website, Chemistry for Life. Well, they do have resources for faculty and educators and students at high school, undergraduate, and graduate levels. They also offer links to websites that provide simulations. As I scroll down right here, we see AACT simulations. We see one for middle school chemistry. We have Merlot. We have PHET interactive simulations, chem collectives, mixed reception. And as I scroll down like this, so there are a fairly large number of available resource websites. Finally, there is Merlot, whose focus is to develop and distribute tools to enable the formation of communities and engaged in building shared knowledge bases of learning materials, which sounds a lot like open educational resources. So here on a search for virtual labs, I see initially 136 possibilities. What I'm going to do is I'm going to filter my audience to, let's see, college general education. And now I have 100 possibilities. So if I choose one, let's see, the virtual transgenic fly lab. Okay, read a little bit more about it. We'll familiarize you with the science and techniques used to make transgenic flies. All right, that sounds interesting. So I can bookmark it and come back later on, or I can ask for additional information, or I can go right to the material. So here we are. So we have some discussion about this particular lab activity, the topic and the level, the description of what's going to go on, learning targets. I think they probably referring to the specific module level objectives. Scroll down, look at some related topics. I'm going to go back up again, and I'm going to launch the interactive component. And here we are. So we can see, let's see if I can extend this, make it a little bit bigger, and I can. Okay. So it welcomes us to the Transgenic Fly Virtual Lab. The lab will familiarize you with the science and techniques used to make transgenic flies. Okay. So I can click right here to enter the lab after thoroughly reading all of the instructions here. And it's just a sequence. Welcome to the Howard Hughes Medical Institute Virtual Transgenic Fly Lab. Please familiarize yourself with the lab introduction in the notebook. So I would come here and I'd start to read that information. Okay, well, there's also a quiz, there's resources and help. All right, so I'm going to start the lab. So it's asking you to start at step 1, preparing the DNA. So you can see this is a somewhat interactive module that'll help us participate in this experiment, this lab activity. All right, let's return to the slide presentation. Okay, any questions? Okay, so the next area that is not really virtual lab, but I mean it's similar in some ways, is remote instrumentation. Now, what distinguishes remote instrumentation from virtual labs? Well, with remote instrumentation, it's the practice of providing control of scientific instruments from a remote location. Okay? So devices for which a college or university might arrange remote access, including astronomical instruments or spectrometers or electronic equipment. Those are examples of the types of devices. Now, because of their expense and their complexity, many specialized scientific instruments are kind of out of the technology or the reach of a lot of institutions. And for some institutions that have those instruments available, sometimes scheduling and other logistical challenges prevents all the students from having access to them. This provides an impetus to offer remote access to address issues of access and efficiency, ultimately improving education's quality and student opportunities. Remote instruments requires an interface. It's typically a browser, and it allows users to control the relevant functions of the instruments. So from a distance, you can see that. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to once again go back to sharing. Okay, so this is sort of, now this actually is a video. It's not meant to be an example of a remote instrumentation, but it talks about it.
Hello, and welcome to an FPGA Vision video. It is September 2019, and our remote lab is now online for about 600 days. So this video, I want to give you a quick overview about some statistics for the remote lab, current status, and the plans we have for the future. You always find current information about our project on our website. And here's the news section of the project. We don't update the content every day, so you might want to use an update scanner. I have an add-on.
All right, I'm going to move ahead.
So we're very happy about that. We had users from Argentina, United States, from France and Spain, from the Ukraine, and also from some countries that, yeah, you can't really see on the map here, like United Arab Emirates, Dominican Republic.
He's just talking about where people are accessing their equipment from. Okay. He's talking about uptime. That's almost 100%. That's pretty darn good, accessing this lab.
Of course, we have our own students at our university, Hochschule Bonn-Rhein-Sieg here in Germany. But in addition, the course has been adapted by the Universidad.
So he's talking about other individuals who are accessing this information, which is really important that it gets used. Just see if I can. Let's see. Here's another example of teaching remotely from
Given today's remote learning protocols, instructors are finding it difficult to incorporate vital laboratory techniques into the curriculum. With remote access to the Analysis benchtop NMR spectrometer, instructors can have some flexibility to allow students to acquire and process NMR spectra. This can be done for a variety of lab experiments. But today, we will highlight this procedure with an unknown isomer determination. To do so, I have prepared 4 samples for a series of isomers.
Okay, so we can see the benefit of that. Open up, share my slides. Amanda talked a little bit about kits. Sometimes they're called kitchen kits. What they're meant to do is really replicate the face-to-face environment experience with equipment and materials that get sent to students' homes. Now, I'm going to give an example of this particular organization. Let's see. I guess I'll have to share that. Really sees itself as a step up and above kitchen science. Okay. So this organization is called Hands-On Labs. They do not see themselves as kitchen science. In fact, each hands-on lab kit is supposed to come equipped with everything that the student needs to conduct their rigorous scientific procedures, all from the comfort of their own home, from lab-grade equipment and microscale quantities of chemicals to proper protective equipment and detailed lab instructions. So now let's go there. Let's just see. So now I'm going to share my screen again. Okay. Oh, I guess they're customizable. They can contain all of the necessary ingredients or materials that students will need to conduct their labs, including lab-grade materials, a consideration for safety when doing the experiments, customization, which means they can address they can adapt the lab kit to the needs of the students and the needs of the curriculum. Okay, and then a device compatibility. Let me give you an example of what one of these lab kits might look like. Here we are, someone who's received a lab kit. This looks like, and this might be interesting to an individual like yourself, Tyler, who teaches on kinesiology.
Assembling the human skeleton model. Remove the styrofoam box from the cardboard cover. Locate the base, support, and washers on the outside of the styrofoam box. Remove each of these items and set aside. Screw the metal support into the base plate. Open the styrofoam box and carefully remove.
So it's just carefully walking the student through the process of working with the materials. Now this is just one example of a lab kit. Let's look at this. This is another example of lab kits. This is eScience Labs. Okay, and we'll look at their video.
The Science Lab, the place where the textbook meets the real world, where the lecture becomes more than words, where teaching becomes learning. At eScience Labs, we believe that every student deserves access to an authentic and engaging lab experience. However, with the growth of online education, many institutions struggle to provide a real lab experience to students outside of the traditional campus laboratory. eScience Labs works with hundreds of higher education institutions to expand online course offerings, overcome lab space and access issues, promote hands-on experimentation, and increase online student engagement. Online students engage in real science exploration through hands-on experiments, coupled with digital curriculum that provides students a traditional lab experience, regardless of time and space. Students can work at their own pace, anytime.
Okay, so we see that this is one company's effort to increase accessibility to the lab experience. Those students who are not in a face-to-face setting. I'm going to go back to my slides. Any questions? So another option is the do-it-yourself. Okay, some prefer using those established virtual lab experiences like we just talked about, Labster and Proxy Labs. But others feel that they probably could, at probably less cost, because there is a cost. One of the things I didn't show you on Labsters is cost per student, per course, per institution, which in this current time probably is not going to be very easy for universities. However, if the lab expense is just added to students, instead of the students paying the lab fee, the university, maybe they would be asked to pay the lab fee for one of these companies that would provide these services. But in the option for doing it yourself, you can create your own lab experiences and that more accurately fit the curriculum that you decide is part of your institution, and that the instructor is following, and then also in the style in which they teach. And so some examples of this are OpenSim and SketchUp. They are the ability to create virtual worlds and 3D modeling tools. Let me just give you an example of that once again. So this is SketchUp, and SketchUp really is a application coming up. It's an application for 3D modeling. Okay, so make anything you can imagine without downloading a single thing. And you can see right here, this is sort of designing different types of, I guess, in this case right here, it's furniture. Imagine you can do that with anything as well. Okay, so SketchUp for the web, 3D modeler runs right in your web browser. You have 10 gigabytes of storage space, mobile viewing, mobile model viewing as well, interoperability, and let's just see here. A similar, I guess, 3D application is OpenSim, which is, it's called OpenSim. But this is Open Simulator. This right here, unfortunately, they don't really have examples of this. You have to download the software to be able to start using it. But some of the features, it supports online multi-user 3D environments. So virtual worlds and 3D modeling tools, they really allow educators and students to be able to create their own models, to engage in role play, to simulate, to collaborate, and to present their information. And I am showing you right here OpenSim, and it can be used to create an immersive space for collaboration and for interaction. And SketchUp is an intuitive modeling tool that helps illustrate everything from small figures to entire communities. Now, these tools are most popular in STEM fields because there's a number of related tools that do not include a learning curve. It may help to read about these tools in context before any decisions to utilize them. I know that there's some examples like pediatric dentistry education and 3D modeling that can be used in engineering as an example. I will send the links for those examples just in case you guys are interested in it. The next item is citizen science. So what's citizen science? Here we go. Well, citizen science is the involvement of the public in scientific research, and actually it's considered an enhancement to online science courses. So maybe not so much a virtual lab or remote instrumentation or a lab kit, something that is an enhancement, okay? So it can actually supplement your courses. And so one of those examples is the citizen science program. As I started to talk about, it says it's the involvement of the public participating in science research, whether that research is community-driven or global investigations. Now, the Citizen Science Association really unites experts from educators and scientists, data managers, and others to empower the citizen science. And you see right here, we have examples of that, right? This is the power of citizen science. It's the involvement of the public in scientific research. And they talk about the number of people who are volunteering and participating, over 1 million people. They have 5,000 members. They have over 2,000 projects ongoing. So as you can see here, special collection in higher education. As I scroll down here, this is just material. This is just support for higher education in the area of theory and practice. Issue overview and article types. So something like this would be an important resource for access. So citizen science programs are really, it involves the public participation in the area of research, allowing for volunteers to contribute their data. These opportunities really allow online students to actively engage in science processes. such as making observations to record evidence or investigating real-world phenomena. Another example, although I'm not going to show it here, really is social media. I'm not sure whether people would think, well, how can social media be an enhancement to online science courses? Well, really, social media can support a number of objectives in science courses, including building course communities and developing and establishing social presence. Or real-world conversations with scientists, or self-directed learning repository. So this is really an interesting way of sharing that information. Now, social media tools can improve learner engagement. They can help provide feedback and support, and they can also help students demonstrate learning outcomes. I'm going to go back to my slides. Why is the possibility of online instruction used, for labs important? Why is it significant? Well, virtual labs allow students to participate in any lab-based learning exercise without the cost and the limitations of a physical lab. So if an institution enrolls several hundred students in an introductory chemistry course, which is very typical, the ability to send at least some of these students to an online lab really could lessen the demand on physical lab space that's needed, or significantly increase flexibility for students, given that they could do work at their own convenience. Now, virtual labs can provide access to students in online programs who are unable to attend physical labs due to illness or injury. And now we're talking about the probably a big part of that is folks who are not able to come on campus because of COVID lockdown. So this is actually a perfect way to address that particular situation. Another one is the cost of errors. I had a friend of mine who's in chemistry. He was a TA for chemistry, and he told me the story of the day before. One of the students dropped a beaker full of some toxic substance, and the lab had to be evacuated immediately. Or maybe in another example, is a biology professor who is a professor emeritus told me about someone who wrecked a very expensive microscope in the lab. So the cost of errors is pretty significant in a physical environment like this, and so doing it online, you don't really have that threat. The other one is, in some ways, virtual labs can offer a little bit more functionality than physical labs. For instance, you can include a quiz, or maybe even provide access to additional educational resources within the simulation. This is always a nice possibility. Now, there are some challenges. What are the possible downsides of this? Well, despite the increasing level of I guess there's nothing like having a physical lab, a real physical experience. And in fact, for some fields, especially for some fields, where people are, majoring in a science, for instance, chemistry, or they will become chemists, or they're in an upper division course. The sense is that working in virtual labs is really not the same as being in a physical lab. And so there is some thought that maybe physical labs can't really equal the experience of being, that virtual labs cannot equal the full experience of being in a physical lab. And that is a significant downside. So as my colleague Amanda had mentioned, perhaps maybe this is more appropriate for the lower division courses, okay, for the introductory courses in various sciences. Also, another challenge is perhaps maybe for virtual labs that are already developed by companies, maybe that there's a need to tailor it, and that might bring an added expense, which would make it untenable if you're talking about changing multiple labs that the institution is purchasing for the students. I'd mention also the questionable authenticity of whether folks can get a genuine experience by participating in these labs. The technology divide, and I think a big part of that technology divide really is whether people have internet access. We should make the assumption that everyone has internet access, although that's easy to do. So if students are depending on doing their labs face-to-face, and now they find themselves having to do it at home and they don't have internet access, or they're relying on perhaps free Wi-Fi at a coffee shop, that might be a limitation to considering virtual lab. And of course, accessibility. Now, notably, some virtual lab tools available today are not accessible to students or faculty with disabilities. Even as such tools extend access to certain groups of users, they may also disenfranchise others. So we're almost at the end of our session, so I'm going to stop the sharing right here. Are there any questions?
You can post your questions to the chat, or you can turn on your microphone and speak them out.
And you can ask questions of Amanda or me. So what we did was just to share with you some of the options that are available for folks who want to recreate what they would do in a physical location, if it's possible online. Now I know that Tyler, you're in kinesiology and physical education. Would be interesting to see if there are virtual labs for that. I think I sort of alluded to that with the use of the lab kit. We had students creating or working on building the skeletal structure, and I'm sure that anatomy and physiology is an important component of kinesiology. Okay, I'm not seeing any questions here, so all right. I think, oh, thank you so much, so I appreciate that. I want to thank you for spending the last hour with us and describing this. All right, I want to wish you all well. Have a good day.
Thank you.